All right, to be honest, I was actually pretty hesitant on even touching on this topic because, in fact, it is so taboo, right? You've got all of these pastors, mega pastors, they're like, oh, give God all your money and he'll give you a Mercedes. Just sow it under the ground, right? You've got that version of tithing. To recognize those that are listening at home and those listening here, I come from an extremely abusive home in the areas of the prosperity gospel. So in my family, if you didn't tithe, then God wouldn't bless you, was ultimately what we believed. And so it was always a topic that I really just avoided at all costs because it was awkward. But you have two sides of the coin. You got the mega pastors, your Jesse Duplantises, your Creflo Dollars, your Kenneth Copelands, those guys standing on the stage of money. Right? You got those guys, right? Or you got the pastors that are so scared to talk about it that they put their offering plate in the back of the room. True story. The atheist will certainly and happily point out, see, all you guys, they're going to see the thumbnail on YouTube. Another pastor talking about money. Well, maybe I just evolved to go ahead and be a con artist and take your money. Right? No accountability anyway. We're just goo to the zoo to you. We've all pond scum, so maybe I evolved to be money hungry, and forgive me, I'm going to manipulate my congregation and give them money. Okay, atheist? We're good. All right. Now, I recognize for those that are listening, tithing is a topic in which is kind of have some ambiguity to it. It's a little ambiguous. It's a topic in which most of us have approached, and we touch on it just enough to basically convince ourselves of our own biases, our own confirmation bias, our own perspective already formed by our own objections about money and tithing, and we do what is called an eisegesis, where we essentially read onto the text what we already think, what we already believe, instead of doing what is called an exegesis, where you allow the context to determine what Scripture says. The major objections, we're going to look at 5. And throughout our TED Talk tonight, or throughout our sermon or lecture, or however you want to call it, we're going to address 5 major objections. It's going to be long, it's going to be lengthy, but it's going to be thorough, and it's going to literally give as much of a biblical case on the issue of tithing that you've probably, maybe, have never heard before. Objection number 1, starting with the most popular one. I believe in tithing as a general rule of just giving. It's not 10%. We're not in the Old Testament, but we should be generous givers. We're in the New Testament now. I used to believe this so strongly, and I call it the adoption of the general principle of giving. As long as you're a giving person, then it's okay. However, those that take this position wait for giving to fall in their lap. People who say this and believe this don't actually tithe. How do I know this? Because I was one of them. And I was just one of them a couple months ago. Objection number 2 usually goes something like this. If Jesus knew what churches spend their money on, then he wouldn't have advocated 10%. Matter of fact, he did not know what they would eventually spend their money on. Therefore, he didn't advocate 10%. And nor will I. Or, I will not commit to giving my money to churches who just spend it on lights, fog machines, and all these other unnecessary things. To be honest, it's easy to determine not to tithe or to tithe based upon other people. How convenient. However, tithing is not based on someone else being obedient to the Lord. Tithing is based on your obedience. You must trust that God has placed the elders and pastors in a position that he has, and you have to trust God with that decision to tithe. Also, and this happens very frequently, especially, I think 22% of people go to church regularly, and now with that there's this leading consensus that, well, eventually when I find the right church, then I will start tithing. And this is very, very popular. It's a very, very common belief out there. The unfortunate and rather convenient part about it is that those same individuals never find a church because they always find something wrong with that church. Thus, it follows they're not responsible for tithing. And I would just encourage you, if that's you, maybe it's best to look inward instead of looking outward. Objection number 3. Why can't I be the one who determines where the money is going? At least that way we know it is going to good causes. I don't need a church to determine where my money is going. Didn't Jesus say that I'm the church? I'm capable of knowing who to bless and who not to bless. Objection number 4. I tithe in different ways. I tithe with my tongue. Me and Shondell actually did this for years. We were going to Foursquare. It was a church in Colorado for about 5 to 6 years. And my wife was volunteering in the nursery, and she was volunteering watching some of the pastor's kids. And so what we thought and what we believed is I'm giving of my time and my energy, and Ben is doing small groups. Ben is doing all these other things to help serve the church. Thus it follows, that's my tithe. Right? It's quite ironic that we come up with all these different excuses and reasons and justifications to not tithe. And we'll go to such great lengths as saying, my time is my tithe. Heck yeah. Objection number 5, and this is the most popular and the most compelling in my opinion. I do not believe God would want me to tithe when I'm broke. Ooh, man. I believe this pretty strongly. We actually just heard somebody say, well, it's either tithing or I'm going to feed my kids. And I'm like, dude, I didn't know we were in the Great Depression and World War II was going on right now. It's like literally you can't feed your kids right now. But yet we'll draw these long hyperboles to say that we won't tithe because we're broke. And what's so convenient about this particular objection is looking back throughout our finances, and from day one when the Lord was working on us in terms of tithing, we would say, we'll tithe when we're not broke. You know what was so amazing about that? There was never a time that we weren't broke. Right? How convenient. It's the best objection. It is the golden ticket objection. That we won't tithe if we are in a financial bind, or we have hardship, or we're struggling. And we're going to find from Scripture tonight, it's not a valid objection in the eyes of God. But it is truly the golden ticket. I would hold that one up to God, and I'd hold the one up and going, well, the Old Testament doesn't believe, or the Old Testament believes it, now we're in the New Testament. I believe that. And yet, is that what Scripture says? But there will always be a bill that's paid. There will always be diapers. There will always be something causing us not to.